I heard the chandelier crack before I heard her voice. A light, barely noticeable, trembling ring above the table sounded at the exact moment my mother leaned in and said, "We only invited you out of pity, so don't stay long." Forks froze midair. My sister smirked. My brother continued slowly swirling his scotch, as if the words were meant for someone else. I felt the heat rise to my cheeks, but my hand remained steady. When I raised my glass, I smiled, took a small sip, and stood up. No one stopped me, no one even looked up. But in 2 weeks, every single one of them will. Before I continue, I need to know if there's anyone out there who has heard words like these. If you have, come with me, because it ended nothing like they expected. Hello, I'm Lotus in this story. When I was a child, the little cabin at Marla Lake was the only place I felt real, not invisible. Grandpa would take me out onto the dock before dawn. The lake would lie before us, a silver sheet waiting for the day to begin. He'd place the fishing rod in my hands, warm and sturdy, while the air smelled of wet pine. At night, we'd sit by the fire, my fingers sticky with burnt marshmallow, and beside us stood a cedar chest holding the cabin's documents. Grandpa always called them ours. One day, he said, "This will be yours. You have to protect it." I held on to those words like a promise. But after he died, the cabin turned into something else entirely. My parents quietly included it in what they called the family property, even though the ownership was still in my name. Summer trips were planned in family group chats I wasn't added to until everything was already decided. Photos from those weekends started appearing in frames all over the house. My brother on the dock, pretending he'd caught the biggest fish. My sister wrapped in a blanket on the porch, my parents smiling as if they had built the cabin themselves. I wasn't in a single picture. I learned early on that attention in our family wasn't shared, it was awarded. My brother was the role model. My sister, everyone's favorite. And I was the workhorse, an extra pair of hands. When I made the honor roll, no one came to the ceremony. When I worked 2 jobs to pay for college, my mom used me as a cautionary tale, make better choices than Lotus. It was never loud, never openly cruel, just a slow, steady drawing of my role. The evening they forgot to set a place for me at dinner. The birthday only Grandpa remembered. The teacher's call saying I'd won a scholarship, and my parents' response, we didn't know she applied. There was one summer when I tried to speak up. They were planning another weekend at the cabin, and I quietly said I'd like to come too. My mother didn't even look up from her notes. "All the rooms are taken," she said. "Maybe next year." My brother snorted. My sister kept scrolling through her feed. I stood there with a bag of groceries, snacks they'd asked me to pick up. No one noticed when I set the bag on the table and left. Looking back, I think that was the day I understood the silence they expected from me and how I would survive inside it. 2 nights later, after that party, my phone lit up on the kitchen counter while I was rinsing a mug. Previews of photos from the family chat flashed on the screen, plans, long message threads I hadn't opened in months. I dried my hands with a towel and looked at the preview. They were planning their annual summer trip to the cabin. My brother sent a picture of a new portable grill he wanted to bring. My sister suggested making matching family t-shirts for photos on the porch. My mother wrote long paragraphs about the guest rooms, the shopping list, the seating arrangements for dinner. My name wasn't mentioned once. Not as a guest, not even in passing. It was like a play where I'd been cut from the cast, but, for legal reasons, left in the credits. I touched the screen and scrolled silently further down. "All bedrooms are taken. Lotus almost never comes anyway. We'll use her key if she forgets to leave it." Her key. As if the place belonged to them. As if it didn't belong to me. A small envelope icon appeared at the top of the screen. Another email from the bank, the kind I usually ignored. I opened it automatically. It was a notice about a joint account I didn't remember ever agreeing to. My name was right there next to my mother's, bolded. At the bottom was a note about automatic property tax payments linked to my profile. Payments for the cabin. Payments I had never authorized. I stared at the screen, and the kitchen suddenly became too quiet. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed outside. The air in my chest felt heavy, like it had thickened. I wasn't just overlooked. I wasn't just an extra guest. I was the name they used when the paperwork required someone responsible. I placed the phone face down on the table. New messages vibrated, the sound resonating through the wood, a slight tremor, as if trying to worm its way back into my attention. I didn't pick it up. Instead, I sat on the chair by the window, pulled my knees up, and watched the city lights flicker in the reflection on the glass. Dish towels hung unevenly on the kitchen rack. A stack of mail leaned against the fruit bowl. Everything felt still, as if on pause, waiting. I closed my eyes for a moment. When I opened them again, something inside had settled. Not anger, not hurt, just clarity. I smiled quietly, barely, almost invisibly. The kind of smile no one in that group chat would ever notice. But soon, they will. The morning after that chat, I woke up before my alarm. The apartment was dim, bathed in that soft gray light that makes everything quieter, calmer. I gathered my hair with the elastic I always wore on my wrist, walked barefoot to the kitchen, and turned on the coffee maker. Its slow drips filled the silence like a metronome. I sat at the small wooden table, its surface ringed with old coffee stains and scratched from years of use. I opened my notebook, the one I used for freelance clients, and turned to a clean page. The pen felt heavier than usual, but the words came easily. Sell the cabin, close joint accounts, call a lawyer about the inheritance. 3 lines, neat, simple, certain. A plan built from silence. I took a sip of coffee and pulled on the handle of the metal filing cabinet. It screeched, as always. The sound rasped across the room. Inside were years of documents, old bank statements, tax notices, utility bills, things most people would have thrown out long ago. I kept everything. It wasn't sentimentality, it was survival. Near the back, I found the cabin's deed, wrapped in an old envelope. The paper was slightly yellowed and still faintly smelled of cedar from Grandpa's chest. I carefully placed it on the table and smoothed the edges with my palm. At 7:14 a.m., I called Dan. He answered with a sleepy voice, clearing his throat. "Lotus, everything okay?" "I need to sell the cabin," I said. No hesitation, quiet, matter of fact. There was a pause, long enough for me to picture him straightening in his chair, fully waking up. "The one at Marla Lake? Your grandfather's place." "Yes. I thought your parents were using it." "They are," I replied. "But they don't own it." Another pause. A shift. That moment when someone realizes the ground beneath them isn't what they thought it was. "Okay," he said slowly. "Send me everything you have. I'll start the paperwork." We ended the call. I scanned the document, page by page, while the soft hum of the scanner filled the kitchen. I sent the files to Dan with a short message, then moved to the next item on my list. Joint accounts. I logged into the banking portal. The screen's white light illuminated my face. My name appeared in places I never expected to see it. Co-signer on an old checking account, secondary holder on a line of credit linked to the auto payments for the cabin's taxes. I clicked through item by item, reading the fine print, the dates, the signatures. Some records went back years. Close account, remove name, cancel auto pay. Each action had a soft click, like distant falling dominoes. I took notes as I went, placing small check marks next to the confirmations in my notebook. At some point, my phone vibrated. A message from my sister. "Mom is planning the trip. Are you coming or not?" I let the notification disappear from the screen without opening it. By noon, I had closed 4 accounts, removed myself from 3 more, and canceled every auto payment linked to my name. The silence in the apartment now felt different. Not empty, but intentional, controlled. Then I drafted an email to Harris, the lawyer who handled my parents' affairs. The email was short, formal. "Hello. I would like to review all documents related to family property and ensure my rights are properly represented. Please let me know your available dates. Sincerely, Lotus." I read the email twice and hit send. My phone vibrated again. This time, a voicemail notification. Probably from my mother, though she hadn't called me directly in weeks. I didn't listen. Not yet. Instead, I cleared the table, neatly stacking the papers into one organized pile, slipped them into a folder, and placed it on the kitchen counter. The apartment seemed sharper somehow, as if the edges of things had come into focus. The plan wasn't emotional. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was procedural, precise, undeniably mine. Around 3, Dan texted. Got the document. All good. Starting to list the property quietly. We'll send updates when an offer comes. I replied with a simple, thank you. As day began to turn to evening, I sat by the window with a fresh cup of coffee. The city lived its life below me, cars, voices, wind tapping at the glass. I watched it all with a stillness I hadn't felt in years. For so long, they had treated me like a name to be used. Like an empty space to be filled, a signature to be borrowed. I had played by their rules. I had been silent, but now the silence belonged to me. I closed the notebook, placed the pen on top, and took a slow, steady breath. This time, I wasn't going to fix what they had broken. 2 weeks passed before anything happened. Long enough for the silence to settle in my apartment like a second coat of paint. I worked, cooked simple meals, answered emails, and watched the city move beyond the window. Nothing dramatic, just time flowing as it always does, quietly, until something cracks. The first crack came early in the morning. I was folding laundry when my phone vibrated. A message from Dan. Offer came in. Buyer is paying cash. Closing soon. Funds will be transferred directly to your account. I read the message twice, not from disbelief, but because it felt foreign, like I was reading about someone else's life. I replied with one word, approved, and set the phone down. By noon, the cabin was gone. I told no one, but they found out anyway. That evening, my sister sent a series of messages to the family chat. They came rapidly, like she was typing while pacing back and forth. Who changed the code to the cabin? Mom is panicking. Dad says there was no realtor sign last week. Lotus, what did you do? I didn't open the chat, just watched the message previews stack up on my lock screen. Each one more desperate than the last. An hour later, my mother called 3 times, then switched to voicemails. Lotus, this isn't funny. Call me back immediately. Then another. You had no right. This isn't just your decision. Call me now. And another, her voice cracking. Lotus, please, you're scaring me. Call me back. I didn't call back. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table, sipping cold coffee, watching the voicemail counter rise like a timer. For the first time, their panic wasn't hidden behind polite words or controlled tones. It was raw, unsteady, real. Then came the bank notifications. My mother sent a photo, blurry, taken at an angle, but I could still make out the red flags. Joint account closed. Credit line frozen. Tax auto payment failed. Additional signer removed. She didn't send any words with the photo. She didn't need to. The image said it all. A few minutes later, my brother called. Then again. Again. I let each call dissolve into the air like a distant alarm. Finally, he sent a single message. What the hell is going on? I placed the phone face down. The vibration hummed quietly against the wooden surface. The apartment felt smaller, tighter, as if the air inside had thickened. The city outside the windows grew still, as if waiting for what I would do next. And then came the moment I had been waiting for. A soft knock at the door, a pause, and then the intercom buzzer. I pressed the button. It's Dad. Open up. There was no trace in his voice of the authority I had grown up with. It sounded strange, somewhere between anger and confusion. I pressed the button, letting him in, and stepped back, leaning against the counter, arms crossed. The door flew open sharply, hitting the stop with a dry click. My father stood on the threshold, breathing heavily, his face flushed. He looked around the apartment, slowly taking it all in. The mismatched furniture, the tiny kitchen, the neatly stacked papers on the table. Is it true? He asked. You sold the cabin? I answered calmly. Yes. You closed the accounts, took your name off everything? Yes. His jaw tightened. Do you have any idea what you've done? I nodded once fully. He exhaled, long and uneven, as if realizing the door had closed, but not on his side. Okay, he said quietly. You've made your point. I straightened up. No, not yet. He looked at me, then really looked. And in that moment, the balance shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet, inevitable tilt. On the counter beside me lay a small envelope, Dan's letter. I slid it toward him. The lawyer's letter is already on its way, I said. You should read this. The expression on his face didn't change, but something in his posture sagged, like a structure whose support beam had been knocked out. He didn't argue, didn't shout. He just turned, opened the door, and left. And for the first time in many years, the silence that remained after him was mine. The morning after he left, the apartment felt unusually bright. Sunlight, in quiet slanted bands, pushed through the thin curtains and fell on the table where the last documents lay in a neat stack. The room remained still, except for the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the soft gurgle of the coffee maker finishing its cycle. I moved slowly, almost carefully, as if the air had gained a new weight. I poured coffee into my chipped mug, wrapped both hands around it, and stood by the window. Below, city life pulsed with its own rhythm. Cars merged in the flow, people crossed streets, a dog tugged its owner toward the park. Ordinary things, steady things, things that needed neither my permission nor my presence. My phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. A message preview appeared on the screen. Mom wants to apologize. Can we talk? We didn't know it was this bad. Please answer. I didn't touch the phone. I let the screen go dark and the silence softly filled the apartment again. I sat at the table, slowly tracing the rim of my mug. The folder with the documents was closed, the cabin deed no longer mine. The accounts unlinked from my name, the legal letter already moving through the system, all of it had ceased to be symbols. They were decisions, final, complete. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel suspended between obligation and resentment. I felt steady, like someone standing on their own porch after a storm, hearing the world breathe again. A flash of memory returned. The cabin at sunset, the lake turning copper as the sun dropped behind the trees. Grandpa's voice, low and calm, telling me to protect what was mine. I had tried to hold on to that for so many years, but in the end, protecting doesn't always mean holding on. Sometimes it means letting go of a place that was once yours, but no longer is. I closed my eyes for a moment and inhaled slowly. The air smelled of coffee, old wood, and morning light warming the floor. When I opened my eyes again, everything was remarkably clear. Not lighter, not heavier, just truer. The silence in the room wasn't the one they had forced me to live in. It was the one I had chosen for myself. I didn't cut them out of my life. I just stopped signing my name to their chaos. Some endings don't slam shut. They settle, like dust after a long exhale, like a door quietly closing on its own. And if you've ever taken back your own peace, you know the sound it makes. It isn't loud, it isn't angry. It's the quiet click of a life that finally belongs to you. If you've been through something like this, let your voice be heard. Tell the story that stayed unspoken the longest. Your story might just be the reminder someone else needs to choose themselves.